Do you feel that your progress with your writing has come to a standstill? Well, in today's writing craft video, I'm going to be covering 6 reasons why that might be. So let's jump right into it. Now, reason number 1 might be that you're not getting enough practice, aka you haven't given it enough time. Writing is a skill that's quite irritating in that you can't really get better at it until you practice for a significant amount of time. Just like drawing or playing an instrument, writing is a skill that takes time to develop. So you're likely not going to be writing a bestseller or a prize-winning story when you're just starting out with your writing craft. So for example, it took me until I was in my first year of university, and at that point, I'd been writing consistently for 6 years to become a good writer. At that point, I'd been writing nearly every day. I'd written many novels and a couple of stories, but it still took me 6 years to become the kind of writer who could sustain good writing over the spans of multiple projects. Before then, I could really only sustain quality writing in about a sentence to a paragraph, so it did take quite a bit of time to develop my writer's voice. What I really want to say to you today is that when you're beginning, accept that improvement takes time. That improvement of your craft will often come in baby steps, which can be frustrating, but in my experience is how improvement in writing works. So I used to wonder when I was like 14, 15, 16, why I couldn't sustain good writing for more than a sentence or a paragraph. And by good writing, let me define that for you in my terms. I thought that that would be writing that was specific, clear, and in a consistent style. The answer to that question, that wondering of how come I can't write better than just this sentence, was that I simply needed more time and more practice to improve. So the second reason you might not be getting better at writing is because you don't have the basics down. This video would be much too long if I broke down what I think are the basics of good writing. So check back next week where I will be discussing the foundations of quality writing, at least in my opinion. So in my opinion, here are the basics of quality writing. Quality writing is when a writer knows when to use scene versus summary. Quality writing will include specific and concrete language. Quality writing avoids overwritten prose. This can often manifest as purple prose. And quality writing also avoids underwritten prose, which can manifest as a lack of exposition. Quality writing will prioritize clarity. Quality writing will also avoid utilizing melodrama to build tension. Quality writing will also utilize the active voice rather than an overabundance of the passive voice. Quality writing will also include varying sentence lengths and sentence structures. Check back next week for a deep dive on those basics, and let's move on to the next reason why you might not be improving at writing. You don't have enough distance from your work. So if you just wrote something the day before, you can't necessarily see that work with fresh eyes, so perhaps you assume you haven't improved since the last time you wrote. So often, writers will read something they recently wrote and feel discouraged because their critical eye that's familiar with the work can only see the work's flaws. If you're discouraged after reading your recent work, let the writing sit. Put it away in a drawer and don't look at it for at least a day. Distance will allow you to see your writing from a fresher perspective. So if you notice something you don't like on your first draft, bold it or leave a note for yourself while you're writing instead of frantically editing it over and over again. I have definitely been there. So the next reason you might not be getting better at writing is because you aren't pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. So the advice I'd give here is to really write in different genres, lengths, points of view, tenses with different characters. So if you keep writing similar characters that are of similar ages, with similar life experiences, in similar situations, in similar points of view, with similar voices and similar tenses, it might be quite difficult to actually get better at writing at a more active pace. Maybe you're looking at this and be like, hey, Rachel, this doesn't sound right. Aren't you the person who has been writing the exact same series with the exact same characters for like nearly a decade? You're right. The thing that I did with Fostered quite early on was I switched the genres of the book. The characters started as 15 and as I'm currently writing them are like 25. I've also added characters. I've taken out characters. I've given these characters new traits that they didn't necessarily have before. Remember when Lonan was an antagonist? So that's all to say that my writing really rapidly improved when I began pushing myself out of my comfort zone. So my comfort zone at that time was the first person present tense comfort zone. For years, I had just written in first person present tense. Genuinely, I did no notice in terms of like looking at this from an objective place, I did rapidly improve when I began testing out new points of view. I began writing stories in third person and second person and first person retrospective, and even just changing the tense from present tense to past tense helped a lot. I remember being so afraid of trying to write new points of view. I had tried, it would just freak me out, and I'd quit quite early on. I had no idea how to write in a new point of view or in a new tense or with a new character or in a different head, that it felt like I was learning how to write all over again. What I didn't realize was that is actually a good thing. So when you learn techniques that are outside of what you're consistently using, you're expanding your toolkit. So you'll also expand your understanding of writing craft with the more variety you include in your writing routine. When you're first starting out is especially the time to experiment. And the truth is that at one point in your writing career, you're going to find the thing that you're really good at, and you're going to write that for years on end. So now is really the time to start experimenting. One day when you find something that you particularly like for example, I love writing first person retrospective, and I'm going to write a lot of stories in that point of view. But before then, I want to experiment a little bit more, test out some points of view I don't use often, like third person past tense, which I actually should jump on because I don't think I've ever written anything in third person past tense. Try out a variety of points of view, try out a variety of characters. When I was sort of shifting Fostered in its many iterations, I changed point of view characters. I left Reeves' head and I jumped into Harrison's and I jumped into Lonan's, and that helped quite a bit because I got to see my story from a different perspective, but also got to see how craft changed between the characters that I was writing, how my diction changed from character to character, how my syntax changed from character to character. Variety is your friend. So the next reason you might not be improving at writing is because you're too perfectionistic. And I hate to use this word. I don't like this word. I don't like calling myself a perfectionist. If you're somebody who focuses so much on really perfecting each detail, you might need to hear this because I've been there. Are you somebody who's focused, like I was at one point, too much on every single detail, on nailing every single word choice down, spending too long on each sentence? What I realized is that this focus on perfectionism, on constructing a flawless piece of writing, can actually stunt your ability to grow as you centralize perfection over writing itself. And as I mentioned before, the best way to improve at writing is to continue to do it. The more and more you write, the better you will get. Perfectionism may also reveal that you don't trust yourself to edit your writing. Perhaps you're afraid of editing or afraid of what others will think. When I was writing, I think book 6 of the Fostered series, I was so perfectionistic with my writing. It would take me half an hour to an hour to write one sentence. It would take me months to finish a chapter, and I barely finished that book. I think it took me like 2.5 years to finish that book, and that's with me consistently writing it, like writing it almost every day or multiple times a week. In moments of perfection, I recommend taking a step back from your work. Perhaps make 1 or 2 changes that make you feel a little bit more confident in the writing, and then put the work away. Making a small tweak that'll make you feel more comfortable might make it easier for you to just step back and be like, okay, I fixed that one word. I'm really comfortable with how that sentence is shaping up, and now I'm going to move on. As I mentioned, when I was writing book 6 of Fostered, which is called Rewired, it would just take me forever to write. For that year, I think I was like from age 16 to like early 17. So for about a year, this is how I would write. It was painstaking. Agonizing over a thesaurus for many hours is going to teach you how to use a thesaurus. It's not necessarily going to teach you how to get better at writing. And most importantly, agonizing over a thesaurus is not going to show you how to edit the words you may not be happy with. An act of resisting perfection is also an act of trusting yourself. The more you trust yourself to revise that first draft that you might not be 100% happy with, the more success you might actually have with the revision, because you know that in the future you can tweak this writing, the more productive you may actually be in drafting. I'm a very detail-oriented person, and honestly, if I'm feeling demotivated, writing prose that I'm not super confident in can be a huge roadblock in my process. The thing about me is that I have come to learn that about myself. So I try to work with that instead of like fully resisting it, because if you're like, I'm a perfectionist, I'm just never going to edit the writing that I make, I'm just going to be 100% happy with whatever I make, that might be a little unrealistic. For me, For example, with Seventh Virtue is supposed to be like my shitty fantasy book. I'm trying to purposefully not write well in Seventh Virtue, but I also have to remind myself that, it's me. Like, I know myself. I know that at one point that's not going to work out for me. I don't care anymore. At one point I'm going to start caring. So it's all about balance. So what I'll do, especially when writing a short story, is I'll write the first page of the story and then I'll complete the second page. After the second page is completed, I will then go and revise the first page to a point where I'm feeling really comfortable with it. I won't take more than half an hour doing that. Put a time limit if you need. I'll then write the rest of the story without looking back. That initial mild tweaking I find really helps motivate me, but also doesn't stick me in a loop of endless edits. So the next reason why you might not be getting better at writing is because you haven't yet developed as an editor. So in my opinion, a writer is only as good a writer as they are an editor. So we've heard the saying so many times, so I'm sorry to repeat it. Writing is rewriting. Developing a critical editor's brain is a necessity to becoming a sustainably strong writer. The ability to think critically, but not cruelly. I really want to highlight that. Critical and cruel are not the same thing. About your writing will come with time and practice. So if you have some old writing from, like, let's say a couple months ago or last year or a couple years ago, copy and paste and excerpt a page or so into another Word document. Go through and first note the things that you really like and genuinely note the things that you are excited about, the words that make your heart sing, and write down a couple of comments about why those elements are working. Then go back through again and note the things that might need work. I personally don't like to view it as the things that are trash, the things that are garbage. I don't like to put those labels on my work as much as I can. Sometimes the Gen Z comes out and I do, but really it's healthier and more productive for me if I think what could use some work. So for example, is the word choice as specific as it could be or as clear as it could be? Is there enough exposition here? Is there enough description? Is the dialogue feeling too mechanical? Is the narrative too internal? Or on the opposite, too external? Do we need a little bit more reflection? Is there enough sensory description to ground a reader? Questions like that. And you can check out my Line Edit With Me series on my channel where I actually go through this line by line on my old work, and I have a couple of videos editing your work. And these are just some examples of how I edit work. So critiquing the work of others, I think, is one of the best ways to get better at writing. So I also recommend, if you have a critique partner available to you, to swap work with them. I did beta reading from a really young age. I started beta reading, I think, when I was 13. So I've been developing my editor brain for about 7 years now. So quite similar to my writing journey. I've been writing for about 8 years, editing for about 7. So that, I think, is a quite good journey to do both together at the same time. So that's what I would recommend. And if you don't have like work available to you, you can even find like a passage from like a novel that's been published or a short story that you find online just for a personal exercise. Because these things are already published, I would never share that with anybody. So check back for a video in the next coming weeks on how to become a better editor, because becoming a better editor is, I think, one of the best things you can do for your writing. Becoming a better editor will also allow you to turn off that inner editor, because at one point you'll mostly be able to separate writing brain from editor brain. At some points it's really difficult and they overlap. The more you edit, the more you write, the better you're going to get at both. Those are a couple of reasons why you might not be getting better at writing. If you found this video helpful, let me know. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the comments. For now, I hope this video was helpful for you, and I will see you in another one. Bye.